Here on 2, we fasten our seatbelts once again for a new comedy series taking us into outer space with the Red Dwarf.
And welcome to From the Archive, a British television live chat. My name is Greg Bakken. Thank you very much for taking the time and joining me tonight. You know, our main topic tonight is going to be a very spoilery review and discussion of the newest Red Dwarf episode, The Promised Land. And, you know, I'm going to have to say this probably over and over and over again, that this is a spoiler review and discussion, because I don't want someone to come on and be like, what happened? You told me everything and now you ruined it for me. So it's very spoilery. We're going to have a discussion. And once again, this is where everybody else comes to play and helps us out here, because what we need to do is we need to have a conversation, everyone together, to talk about what we thought about it, because I'm going to have a special guest with me tonight to talk about and help us discuss what we saw. But that's, you know, part of it too, is because I want to make sure that it's not just me talking nonstop, because if you give me the opportunity to do so, I will do exactly that. And my guest tonight, Mike, him and I have been watching these shows for decades and have discussed them for decades. So I'm really excited to get his point of view on it. In fact, him and I have not even talked about what we thought of the episode, because we are both kind of waiting to hear each other's reaction on this, which is going to be kind of nice. A couple things that we're going to do tonight before we get to the Red Dwarf discussion is every week I like to pull something out of my own collection of what I think is kind of a unique piece of, not even unique, but something I've been watching lately, or something I find very interesting, a DVD, some British television that I kind of like, and explain why I like it. So I hope you're okay with that. I also like to show off a little bit of some of the new stuff that I received, because sometimes people may not even realize that some of that stuff is out on DVD or Blu-ray or whatever. And I think what I'm going to show you today is going to be kind of a no-brainer. I think a lot of people have seen this stuff before, but nevertheless. And then just going to be talking about a couple other things. Just so you know, we are currently on my personal profile page, but also on the From the Archive Facebook page we're streaming. Also the From the Archive YouTube page. This is the first time we're doing that. I thought we could stream to the Kaleidoscope page, and I told everyone that we could, and I apologize. I think the settings for the Kaleidoscope page currently are where they're at, makes it difficult for me to be able to actually stream with them, as well as all the other places I want to stream to. So I do apologize for that, because I'd like to get as many people to take part as possible. Feel free to leave comments even now, just whenever you want to. Say hello, whatever else. We'll have them appear on screen if you have questions or you have comments about what you're seeing or what you want to talk about. Just, you know, leaving it very open. So why don't we get started? First of all, one thing I like to do every week is delve into either the radio times or the TV times. You know, those for those in the US, it's kind of like our TV guide. You know, it's the television listing book. Radio Times has such a rich history of articles and listings and stuff, and TV Times started mainly with the ITV side of things. This week, I wanted to focus on an issue, or at least a couple listings in the issue. And this is actually from the February 13th to 19th, 1988 issue of the Radio Times. And as you could possibly imagine, because we are talking about Red Dwarf today, I thought that it's a really good opportunity to kind of go back to the roots. So Red Dwarf now have been on for what? It's been around for 32 years. This is their start on the Radio Times, which first of all is just a very small preview. It's Scouse in Space, you know, and as you can see, there's a little write-up about the episode, for the first episode going out. God, hard to believe they were all that so young looking, right? And then, of course, we have the Radio Times listings for that episode. And what's really interesting about it, and once again, I know that this is small, so I do apologize, but underneath the pictures, it's R. Arnold Rimmer and Dave Lister, made of the right stuff, Watch This Space. And that was in 1988, February of 1988. Here we are 32 years later, they're still making new content. And although they're not on the BBC anymore, I think the series has stayed pretty true to itself. The funny thing is, this is in the Radio Times, and the Radio Times itself is no longer owned by the BBC. So, I mean, even Red Dwarf has kind of outlasted the Radio Times, so to speak. But it is really interesting. Now, what you probably can't see, if you put your face really close to the computer screen, you might be able to see. It says it stars Chris Berry as Arnold Rimmer, Craig Charles as Dave Lister, and Danny John Jules as ? They didn't want to let the cat out of the bag, so to speak. I'm laughing at myself because I can see Mike laughing on the screen, because he's just probably like, how can I get out of this? And rightly so, Mike. It's really kind of cool to look back on this stuff and to see, at least for this, they don't have a illustration of the cat as they did in, I think, one of the US printed versions of the Red Dwarf, one of the Red Dwarf books. It might have been an omnibus of all of their stuff. And I don't have the graphic here, but all the characters on the front cover, none of them really look like what they do in the series, especially Cat, which literally looks like pretty much the same about the cat. It's literally a cat in a suit, and that itself is a lot of fun. Yeah, so just wanted to kind of share that. I just love looking back at those old Radio Times, and I never really thought much about them, but I do have to thank the people who put out the Doctor Who DVDs when they started including all the Radio Time listings, because that to me was pretty cool to see that. And suddenly, as with everything that's involved me, I can't just stop at having the Doctor Who listings. I have to have the listings for every single piece of British television. So sadly, that is where we're at. And MJ, I see that you left a comment for us. I'm gonna put that comment in more towards when we start talking about Red Dwarf. It's a great comment. Thank you for doing so. I'll make sure that it's shared with everybody. Moving on, I just wanted to share this week. I get from time to time, and this week I had a couple of them. People on my From the Archive Twitter account. They send me and they tag other people who they think might have some good ideas and about what to watch. And someone had asked this week, like, for comedy, what would you recommend for comedy, like a British television comedy series that isn't like an Are You Being Served, Dad's Army, something that everyone knows about? And the people who responded along with me, they had some absolutely incredible series that even myself, I haven't either I have it on DVD, but I haven't gotten around to watching it yet, or I haven't even heard of it, which to me is always exciting, because that means what's next? I'm going to want to watch it. And that means probably network is going to make some money off of me. But what I did is I kind of looked around, like, well, what could I share? Because I find that there's so much out there now, and so many people like so many different things. I decided to go more of a very traditional comedy route. And what I had decided that I really like is Hugh and I. And if you've not seen Hugh and I, it's simplistic humor. It's produced by David Croft, and directed by David Croft, who did Dad's Army. And it's with Hugh Lloyd and Terry Scott. And what I like about this is that they're very much kind of very Laurel and Hardy, so to speak. Hugh Lloyd is playing the part as very stupid. And I love Hugh Lloyd because Hugh Lloyd appears in so many episodes of Hancock's Half Hour that every time he appears, I almost smile as much for him appearing as for anybody else. And he's not a main cast member. He's just somebody who is a a guest star every once in a while, and he's fantastic in it. And of course, Terry Scott, he's been a real stalwart in a number of Carry On films, going back to the original Carry On Sergeant. He was in that one, as well as Happily Ever After, the BBC series, as well as Terry and June. But for those of you who might be like, oh, that voice is going to sound a little familiar to me, he was the voice of Penfold on Danger Mouse. So these two are at the top of their game, and I wanted to share a quick clip from the series so that you can kind of see the type of humor, which may not be something you're interested in, but it's something that I really do enjoy. Also in the series would be like people that you might recognize would be Jill Curzon, who was in Dalek Invasion Earth 2150 AD. Molly Sugden had a role in it through a couple of series, playing Neighbor. I think it's a lot of fun. And here's just a sample of an episode of Hugh and I. Take a look, please.
Excuse me, sir.
Oh, yes?
Perhaps you would care to order now, sir?
Yes, may as well. Our friends will be here any minute.
Now. There's no charge for looking, sir.
I'll never get through all this.
What do you recommend?
It's all excellent, sir.
Yes. Yes. Well, what did my friend Lord Popham have? Huh? Oh, I'm sorry to disturb you. I just wondered what you had to eat and if you could recommend it.
Oh, yes. So, asparagus au beurre, sole bol fan, supreme de volaille, and épinards en branche.
Oh, yeah. What then?
Wind.
Might I make a few suggestions, sir?
Oh, yes, if you will.
Now, first of all, perhaps you'd like to start with an aperitif?
Oh, yes, an aperitif. Oh, yes. Lloyd, would you care for an aperitif?
Yes, has it got any bones in it?
To drink.
Oh, yes, please.
I think I'll have a fairly dry martini.
Fairly dry martini, yes, of course. And for you, sir?
A fairly wet one.
Sweet.
Sweet martini. So now what would you like to start with, sir? Would you like some hors d'oeuvre, melon, smoked salmon, asparagus, avocado?
Yes.
Yes, what?
Oh, yes, please.
Yes, please, what, sir?
Yes, please. I'll avocado.
It's a pear, sir.
Oh, no, thanks. Just the one.
2 asparagus, please.
2 asparagus, sir. And to follow, sir?
Well, we'll have, any one of these entrees will do.
Have you any tripe and onion?
2 steaks.
Steak, very good, sir. Perhaps you'd prefer the table d'hote?
Yes, if it's tender.
No. Just 2 steaks, please.
Steak, very good. The fillet, sir?
Filet.
Yes. How would you like it done, sir? Rare, medium?
Rare.
Rare, so good. For you, sir, well done.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, well done.
Wasn't anything, really. I just...
Okay, so I'm laughing. I think that's good stuff. I'm sorry. It's obviously very simplistic humor. It's, just like I'm a big fan of like, Are You Being Served? Some days you just have bad days and you just don't want to think about what you're watching and just want to be entertained. And for me, shows like that really hit the mark. And for Hugh and I, just as as everything else from the BBC back in the day, this only includes episodes of series 1 and 2 that still exist. But what's also interesting is by the time this was released, there are 3 episodes that are not included on this set. One being Beau Jester's, Chinese Crackers, Girl in the Poster. A couple of those had been found after this was released. And of course, the series Hugh and I went on to become Hugh and I Spy for a little bit. And and it's just I think that it's just fun. And so if you want something to do, check it out. With it being a Simply Media release, I'm not sure how many if it's easy to get a hold of or not, because Simply has gone away. But check it out. You might be able to get it for really cheap too if it's something you're interested in. One thing I wanted to talk about too was that as we like to talk about missing episodes and the whatnot, that there is a number of finds that Kaleidoscope had announced since the last time that we had done one of these. And I wanted to quickly go through them and talk about them, and then I want to show a clip of one of them. And so what we have here is these are the number of discoveries that Kaleidoscope had announced since the last time that we got together. And some of these are very interesting, and I'm going to pull out my notes. I'm not going to go heavily into detail with them because they are available on the Kaleidoscope Facebook page. But Sunday night at the London Palladium Extract, these are audio recordings, and they were donated by Darren Hart and transferred by Neil Ingo. And there's a ton of stuff that is on these extracts that are worth taking a look at the Kaleidoscope Facebook page to take a look. Then you have Songs of Many Lands that was found in Holland by Bert van Breda and returned to Kaleidoscope by file. I thought number 597 is really interesting. It's the Comic Relief, the New Statesman episode that actually is just studio footage. And we did something very similar. I don't know if you saw what we did in Christmas. I edited together all of the Cavalier years studio footage based on what we provided to kind of give like an insight into the behind the scenes of that. So maybe we could do something like that for this too. And that was this was donated to Kaleidoscope by Gary Crichter, and also has the voice of Chris Berry in it, as it happens. This is from a VHS source. It was originally on 1-inch. Then we have Tension, the Diamond Expert, which is from 16 millimeter film. We also have, which I find very interesting, I wish we had a clip of this, The Fraggles Are Coming, which is a 5-minute specially made promotional film that was screened several times over Christmas and New Year's of 1983. What's interesting about that is, of course, it was written by Victor Pemberton, who was very big into the Fraggle Rock, helping make that work. And then, of course, in it we have Fulton Mackay, who was the original. I don't know the name of these characters, but he was the original human. Where in the U.S. here we got somebody else. We have Discovery 600, Good Morning Scotland, which was donated by Tony Curry. Then we have Space Shopping, Episode 1. This isn't I don't think this is quite as cool as I think it sounds, Space Shopping, because I imagine space, like outside of space. Space Shopping was donated on VHS by Tony Curry from his collection. 602 is BBC Choice Scotland, which was also donated. Tony Curry was the announcer for that, and so it's from his collection that he donates it. Then we have Fun Bus, number 603, donated by Tony Curry. I am kind of moving through these, but keep in mind that this information is in great detail on the Kaleidoscope Facebook page. And then what I'm really excited about is number 604, which is the London Palladium show. And this has just been announced on the Kaleidoscope page probably about 15-20 minutes ago. And this is one of those great, interesting pieces because it's a British show, but it was found in the US. In fact, Ray Langston found it going through records at the New York Public Library. It was returned to ITV from Kaleidoscope just prior to the virus stuff happening. So it's now back with ITV. What's interesting about it, it's been repurposed with heads and tails of it with the NBC logo. That's the NBC network in the US. So they showed it. It has Fess Parker, who is actually emceeing the night. So it's an American emceeing the night. And it's a whole lot of other acts along with it too. I want to show a clip because this hasn't been seen in since 1966. So we're looking at quite a number of years, more than my small brain can actually really figure out with math. And this is a real interesting clip. It's not, it's not interesting. It's a very timely clip, but it's Dave Allen, comedian Dave Allen. And, right away, I'm just, I haven't seen any of his work for years and years and years, Dave Allen at Large, all that good stuff. So what this is, it's a clip from the first about minute or two of his segment of the show. You'll see it's in black and white. You'll see it's actually, this is from a domestic recording. You could see the VHS or U-matic or whatever banding on the bottom of the screen. And that alone makes me just love the clip. But this hasn't been seen in, obviously decades. And thank you to Kaleidoscope for allowing us to show this tonight. So this is the London Palladium show, and it's episode 6 from the November 6th, 1966. Why don't you take a look?
Ladies and gentlemen, normally when I come on stage I talk about Ireland, and tonight is no exception. In Ireland we have a folklore, what is known as a folklore, and we have things like leprechauns and great warriors like Finn McCool. But also part of the Irish folklore is a thing called a banshee. And a banshee in Gaelic means somebody who's got very long hair which they comb all the time, and they moan and they scream. You have the same thing over here, only you call them the Rolling Stones. Also, during the Troubles, everybody who was sympathetic to the cause was used. And there was a story of a little song and dance man who used to work the theatres doing his song and dance, and he was incorporated into the movement, into the boys. And he used to carry little messages from town to town. And eventually the British, they found out about this. And they arrested him and sent him to jail. And he's sent to jail for 15 years. And he's in jail. It's driving him mad in jail. And he writes to a friend. And he says, "Friend." He wrote in a whisper, he said. He says, "Send us a cake. And in the bottom of the cake, put a foil. And when I get the foil at night, I'll foil through the bars." He said, "I'll drop down into the big yard. I'll run across to the big wall. You have a donkey and cart on the other side of the wall. And I'll make a quick getaway." The cake arrives. And he foils through the bars. And he drops down into the big yard. And he runs across to the big wall. And just as he gets to the big wall, the searchlight goes, boom, right onto him. And he stands there and he goes, "Jeez. Am I a little boy?"
Isn't that kind of cool to be able to see something that no one else has seen for decades and decades? And then, we had, last time we did this, we had a conversation about missing Doctor Who mainly, but also applies to missing British television in general. The idea of, well, when can we ever see this stuff? And, it's nice to be able to share something at the very least. Chuck, you're giving me an idea of maybe an upcoming episode of this live chat, because there is a different Fraggle Rock in the UK, and I think, and there's people who are much better at this than I am about Fraggle Rock. Mainly the Muppet sections I think are pretty much the same. It's just the linking section with the human and Sprocket. That's the stuff that's different, but I'm sure there's other variations, and it'd be fun to get someone on here. And we know there's a ton of experts on this out there who could come up and tell us what that stuff is, what the differences are. So maybe we'll do that down the road if there's people who are interested in that, because I could learn from it also. There's some good stuff. Before we get to our Red Dwarf discussion, I just wanted to share that I did finally get my faceless one. So maybe we could do a conversation about that at some point and kind of do a review. Funny enough, I ordered this twice, once being the Steelbook that I didn't realize I ordered, the second being the regular version. Steelbook arrived, which I'm really excited about. Unfortunately, my other version hasn't arrived yet, and I don't know if that's virus related or if it's something that is or if it's something that just got lost in the mail, because we've all been talking. There's some weird stuff going on with Amazon lately. Tobias, thank you so much for your comment. The question I have then, and I don't know if you know this, I think all the US stuff pretty much exists. The British stuff is spotty. What about the Canadian version then? Is all of those exist, or is that kind of also something that people try to track down and find? Because I have absolutely no idea. And yes, Fraggle Rock, definitely, maybe a touch after me, but it's certainly a lot of fun to watch. And just that whole aspect of it's really interesting. Real fast, I also picked up the Lotus Eaters, which I have not seen before. I've heard really good things about it. Unfortunately, I have a slight illness because there's 2 series of this, and this is only the first series. So I'm going to have to track down the second series because I must have it complete. I just there's something wrong with me. I always must. So basically what we're finding out here is that every continent, every country on the planet has made Fraggle Rock. Okay, now I get it. Okay, I didn't know that. It's probably the same. I mean, it's probably not surprising because we know that like Sesame Street has multiple versions of it throughout the world. So, I mean, it makes sense. It's so easy to translate. I also want to share with people the fact that I don't just collect British television. I picked up a pair of Metropolis. I hadn't got the Marauder version, and I've been really meaning to do so. And then, of course, the regular Blu-ray to go along with my UK release, my steelbook of it. There are some slight differences with the intertitles that I just prefer this one a little bit better, to be honest. But you know, being a collector sometimes is both good and kind of frustrating at the same time. So, yeah, that's always very exciting to do that. And I don't know, what have you all gotten lately? Let me know. Let me share with me any new releases that you got, anything that you're excited about that you want to share with everybody, because we'd love to do so. As we go into our conversation about Red Dwarf, doesn't mean that we can't talk about other things too. So feel free we can zigzag the conversation as much as we want, because this is our time to geek out over our favorite genre, which is British television.
You must think I'm stupid. Give me one reason why I shouldn't unplug right now.
Whoa. Look, we need you. I need you.
Why?
You know, to bounce off, ideas and stuff.
You don't need me. I'm not sure you ever did. I don't exist. What's the point of me?
Remember the posse? With the boys from the Dwarf, like the 4 Musketeers. D'Artagnan, Porthos, Athos, and the other one. Remember, you're the other one.
I'm the other one?
You do all the stuff that the other one does.
And what's that then?
Other one stuff.
Other one stuff? What's other one stuff?
All the stuff that the others haven't done, that the other one does.
I'm pointless.
No, you're not. You know what? I'll tell you the point of you. A moon cannot make light, right? And yet there's such a thing as moonlight.
It's light reflected off a moon from a sun.
Yeah, but the sun can't make moonlight without the moon. And the moon can't make moonlight without the sun. So who's making the moonlight?
They both are.
Which means that even though a moon cannot make light, moonlight exists. Like you, Smeghead.
I think that's in my opinion, one of the defining moments of the relationship between Lister and Rimmer, which is something that can only happen after, in my opinion, after, a great period of time of characters and actors being together. We're going to move on now to our very spoilery conversation about Red Dwarf, The Promised Land, that aired on April 9th on Dave, the channel Dave. Some of you might have seen it other ways. Just saying, and we're not judging here because I might be one of those people. But we want to have a conversation about it. I want to invite you into the conversation. we're going to invite Mike in real fast. But before we do that, I also want to throw out to people our question of the day when it comes to Red Dwarf is, what is your favorite moment from Red Dwarf? Now, I'm not saying what is your favorite episode. I'm saying your favorite moment, okay? So I want you to think about that. And I want to share with you two of my favorite moments. You should do it this way so you can actually see the number. These are my two favorite moments from Red Dwarf, and they're not, there's so many great moments. This one to me is very underplayed, but I love the sarcasm in it, and I love the meaning from it. So this is my first.
Look, I'm not much good at big speeches, and I know I haven't always been an easy guy to get on with. And I know that given the choice, I probably wouldn't have chosen you as friends. But I just want to say that over the years, I have come to regard you as people I met.
And then, of course, curiously, from the same series, and actually very apt for the moment, here's another one that I absolutely love, and I could watch this over and over and over again.
That's it. 5 days. We've got him. Space Corps Directive 699. We can demand a rescreening. He'll refuse. He can't. He's playing it by the book. We've nailed him.
Gentlemen, your conversation makes interesting listening.
Rimmer, is that you?
Oh, yes.
How long have you been listening?
2, maybe 3 hours.
Well, no one's got any disease, man.
We're clean. You have to rescreen us, sir, as per Directive 699.
No one's got any virus and no one's smegging nuts.
Well, that's good. Is something amiss?
Amiss? God, no. What could possibly be amiss?
You don't think there's anything amiss? I'm sitting here wearing a red and white checked gingham dress and army boots. You think that's unamiss?
No, of course not. It's just we thought you'd gone nuts. We were trying to heal you.
I was just doing a little test. A little test to see if you'd gone crazy. If there's one thing I can't stand, it's crazy people.
God, that's funny. I love that. Okay, let's bring in Mike right now. Mike is of absolutely nothing interesting about him whatsoever, so there's no need for any sort of introduction. In fact, I was trying to find a way to get your name off the screen before we started, but
kill the broadcast.
Well, it's probably melting down as we speak. So Mike and I have been friends for a great number of years, for about as long as Red Dwarf has been on the air, if not a little bit longer. And so obviously one of the things that we share the most is our absolute love for British television. Red Dwarf even more so, but I'm going to be honest, Mike, I didn't get into Red Dwarf probably until Series 5, which probably plays no coincidence why some of those are my favorite clips. Mm-hmm. You got into it from the very beginning, right?
Definitely early on. I was trying to remember because it has been a long time. But I do recall seeing it my first year in college, which would have been late 89, early 90. And a friend of mine from Pittsburgh who was feeding me Doctor Who episodes sent along this series and said, "Oh, Mike, you ought to watch it." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And fell in love with it instantly. Got the first, I think, 2 seasons at that point. And have been hooked ever since.
Yeah, I for some reason, I mean, I saw like the first episode and whatnot, and it just didn't really resonate with me the way that it should. And to be honest, like series 1 and 2 are not my favorites, as far as I'm concerned. But I still watch them, and there's still so many good things that are in them. So we're going to talk about Red Dwarf, but we're going to start our discussion with the Promised Land, which is something that just aired, and we both just watched it. I watched it twice. The first time I watched it, I have a channel on my Roku device that you pay a certain amount of money a month, and you get a ton of British television channels like Dave, BBC One, all of them. And apparently that they're not, that app is not available anymore, but I seem to have been grandfathered in because it's still there. So I watched it on broadcast. So that's 3 p.m. my time, kind of like now. Watching it with commercials was a real slog. It was really, really difficult to watch. I watched it again on Friday night with no commercials, and it was a different experience. What are your immediate thoughts on what you had seen with this newest episode of Red Dwarf?
Right. Well, unlike you, I had to fly to the UK in order to see that episode. So I'm still kind of jet lagged from it all. But no, I saw the commercial-less version, and I would think that having commercials would be very jolting, very disconcerting. Almost like, and I don't know how controversial this is, it's almost like when you don't have the laugh track or you don't have the audience reaction, like in series, I think it was 7. And it really was a different experience for me. So I kind of like that. I could see why it would throw a person off.
It really did kind of jar quite a bit. But working in the advertising industry, I get the purpose of commercials. At the same time, though, I wish that I don't want to see them on something I really want to watch. What did you think of the story?
I was really impressed. Kind of like you, I was a little nervous when it was announced as a 90-minute special, because I had the back to earth vibe going with that, and thinking, oh man, it always plays better as individual episodes. So I was really pleasantly surprised with how enjoyable it was. Not that I have a low bar for it, but just it was a worry. And when you love something and have watched it for as long as we have, I think you kind of build that up, that you kind of brace yourself like, oh God, I want this one to be good, because I don't want to see the quality lag. But for me, it hit on so many levels and emotional levels, which is really unusual. The clip you picked with the moonlight really struck me, because you don't normally get that level of earnestness and like true emotion between those two characters, between any of the characters in that series. So it was really, and you're right, it couldn't have played any better than 32 years later, after the audience has kind of gone along with them on that journey.
It's incredible too, because that's only part one of that scene, in a sense, because then you get to the end of the program. Remember, folks, this is very spoilery, so if you don't want to know what happens, then please shut off. I don't want to be blamed for ruining your experience, but at the end of it, things were very dire. It was very much an apex at the end of this serial, and there's that moment when Rimmer looks to Lister, and he's like, "I can use some of that moonlight now," and that just is like, wow, that's pretty incredible, considering having Rimmer reach out, and expose himself as somebody who is, needing help. And he does this really only to Lister. That scene that we watched was just with Lister. Crichton was in it, and that was the comedy bit, but there is that real moment that Rob Grant should be really, really happy with, because that was a great piece there, I thought too.
Yeah, I think coherently the story holds together so much better than Back to Earth. Like there are so many moments within it, and the humor is really strong in it. So to me, it's firing on all cylinders.
I don't know if I'm going to go that far, Mike, to be very honest.
No, man, you know what a Pollyanna I am.
You are a bit of a Pollyanna, and I admire that, to be very honest. I admire that that you can. And folks, please feel free to let us know what you thought of the episode too. I'd love to include everyone into the conversation. I wish, sometimes I'm so cynical about stuff that it's to my detriment, and I'm going to be the first to admit it. Overall, like I said, I watched it twice. The first time I was really nonplussed. The second time I thought, wow, this is much better. I watched it in better quality, which it looks really good. There's still some things that I just couldn't get past. And one of them is you have this is a hard one. You have the cast of Red Dwarf, who are really amazing. Then you always seem to get these people playing these secondary roles that are not up to snuff. They're not as good. And with the Cloister followers, they're pretty decent. They're all right. But the dude who plays like the supreme leader, whatever, the super cat or whatever he is.
Mm-hmm. The Feral, I think his name is.
What's that?
Feral King, I think.
Yeah, Feral King, absolutely. Yep. he, in my opinion, he really lets it down. And I'm not sure if it's, I don't want to just, disparage an actor. I think, it could be the writing, could be whatever we, whatever you think it is. But whenever the Red Dwarf team are not on screen, I'm wondering where the Red Dwarf team is. Where are those actors? Where are those characters? Because that's what I want to see. Another thing that I get really, it just kind of blows me out of whack for whatever reason is, and I saw it on some forum, and I really think it's a good way of putting it. It's like the Happy Days syndrome when it comes to audience. There's that beginning bit with the cat flap entering the Feral King's domain. It's cute, but there you have people who are like clapping because they're laughing so hard. It's like, boy, maybe
in and everyone applauds, and he hasn't said a line yet.
That's exactly what it comes down to, and it's just like, I'm sorry, it's cute, but it's not even clap worthy. It's, you'd hope you see something like that. And so I thought, geez, that's whatever. It just right away though, it's just like, oh, now I'm getting annoyed. After seeing it a couple times, I'm like, okay, I need to get past it. I also was frustrated in a sense that this is the cat's people, cat's, where he started. Very little of it actually revolved around him interacting with people of his kind. Like there was never a moment of either the cat people or Cat himself being surprised to see each other.
Right. And they abandoned him and left him on Red Dwarf.
Absolutely. And I found that to be really interesting, that you have these people who you'd think that someone would be like, wow, you're like us. Or he kind of did like, wow, there's really people like that when describing the Feral King. It's just not like, you expect a little bit more. And then it was very kind of throwaway at the end to find out that the Feral King and Cat are brothers, which is kind of like, all right. Right. I did really like the fact, once again, that little bit of humanity to it with Cat saying, they're like, do you want to come home? And he's like, I am home. This is my home. And that was very sweet. I was talking earlier with a friend, and I said, what would have been kind of fun would be if the Feral King was actually played by Danny John Jules. Like if it was like a dual role, because they don't really share screen time at all. And if they were brothers, Danny John Jules could play the shit out of that. He really could. So
I think those are all fair criticisms, because those, I noticed those as well. And just the tone of the Feral King, like we've had plenty of bad guys before, but and I might be off base with this, but there's always like a sense of silliness about them, even though they're like evil and terrible. And with this, it was just like there wasn't a whole lot of humor with him. He was just nasty, which didn't feel like your typical Red Dwarf villain.
No,
a good or bad thing, but it was something I didn't expect.
Absolutely, and I think that's very true too. The idea that that you have this. And I think there is a couple examples of it too. These villains, that the tone, I think, is a really good point, Mike, that you said that the tone just doesn't feel right, doesn't fit in. It's a fine line too, I think, that to go between campy and being silly to the fact of just trying to, like, you have that there. He's, Rob Grant's, establishing a very serious threat to the Red Dwarf team, but at the same time you have the Red Dwarfers doing, being crazy and goofy as they normally would. Like you have that scene where the Feral King gets the scratching post.
Yeah. And
that could have been a really funny sort of thing, but it's not. It's just kind of weird, and just it falls flat. It should be really cool, but it falls very flat, I think.
Well, and it's Red Dwarf inhabits a really unique subgenre where you have comedy and you have like science fiction elements, and this might be why so many people steer away from that, because it's, you can either do comedy really well, you can do the sci-fi really well, but it's difficult to blend those two together. And I think what we're talking about might be those moments where they didn't quite blend as well as it could have.
Well, and anyone who's watching this right now, let us know what you think. I'd be curious to know. Because I was reading on Rhubarb's, which is really the only place I go to for British television forums.
Well,
and
still lets you in.
They don't let you in?
No, that still lets you in.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, that's just a given. I mean, I go under a different name, of course. I go under Phil Morris, and they seem to really like that. But what I do though is what I saw though is like on the Red Dwarf, the Promised Land thread, it seemed to be for the most part a very overwhelming success. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that for Dave, the channel, it was an overwhelming success. Mm-hmm. So I think it's not a matter of if we'll get more Red Dwarf, it's probably more of a matter of when. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the stuff that I'm criticizing, it doesn't seem like a ton of people are necessarily finding that. And maybe, Mike, at the same time, you have these times where a lot of people are really down. There's a lot, you know, people are feeling trapped. People are feeling like, you know what, I need something to lift my spirits. It's silly. It's fun. Mm-hmm. It's familiar. You know, I mean, that's the thing I felt really good about with Red Dwarf was, unlike Back to Earth, this felt very familiar. This felt comfortable to see these characters again. And we've had enough time now since 2009 when Back to Earth came out that we're all experiencing this new wave of Red Dwarf episodes. Mm-hmm. But it felt really comfortable with those characters, even with Kat really going after Rimmer about the fact that he doesn't make his own decisions because he's just a computer representation of the old Arnold J. Rimmer. Mm-hmm. You know, it's all still, I mean, it's still fun to watch them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was struck by some of the really minute details, like the followers of Cloister, they all have like a cigarette in their ear. Right. Like from the first series.
Yeah, because he hasn't done that really since especially since probably series 7 or something, I would say. Mm-hmm. You're right. And I'll tell you, when they sing that, they do that chant with Cloister, and then when they do it with Rimmer, it's stuck in my head. I can't get rid of it. I just absolutely just like, you know, just I want to be like Kat. I want to dance along with it. I want to sing along with it.
And that was another brilliant scene where they send Kat out to like convince them that Lister is not a god, and 30 seconds later he's dancing with them.
And equally as brilliant is that they send out Rimmer, and you're like, there's no way he's going to turn, and then suddenly something happens for him to stop having to explain to them. And I thought that was a real smart move, the way that they did that, so not getting completely weird. Some of that stuff was really good. I do wish that a little bit more was made of the fact that the whole cat world, the whole cat subculture, you know, I just feel like that it was not a plot device that was really fully developed. And I think there's a lot of stuff that happened in this episode that was filler, to be honest. You know, I think you could have cut out actually a lot, and there's some funny stuff in there, but like that whole bit with Rimmer asking Crichton to follow him, and he's like following him like a private eye and whatnot. And I guess you can argue that builds up the fact that Crichton needs this tune-up, which ultimately leads to what happens at the end of the story. Mm-hmm. It still just felt like a bit like, in my opinion, come on, let's get on with this a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think there were a couple moments like that. The Space Corps Directive, which is such a classic joke, and they threw one or two in, and maybe it was just the delivery. It was kind of like, you know, it just didn't have that same punch that some of the other jokes did.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And I
was struck by some of the visuals too, like Crichton. It never hit me until this story, but they have him very like worn down, cracked screen, bits are welded on him, and I'm like, wow, why haven't they done that like several series before? Because, you know, a lot of time has passed. So I liked that idea of showing wear and tear.
Absolutely. And it's funny too, because I think I read an interview with Robert Llewellyn, and he kind of makes it sound like that he feels like it mirrors him because he is, you know, into his 60s now. Mm-hmm. And it kind of sounds like to me that if they're doing any more, it doesn't necessarily mean because Rob Grant wants to write them, or if the other three want to do it. It's kind of like does Robert Llewellyn want to go through all of that, rigmarole of getting the makeup on again and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of think about it, because I'm sorry, I don't see, apart from like Back to Earth, there's like a lot of wrinkles between his mask and him. I haven't really noticed that since. And I just find that, he's so lovable in that costume. He's just, he's so good. And he talks about in his interview about how a couple times you could tell it kind of bothers him that they have to like make a bigger costume because he's gained weight or whatnot. And it's like, honestly, I don't think anybody really notices, because we just love that character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and everybody has aged, and I like some of the subtle jokes about that as well. That you could tell that these aren't guys that are young anymore, and they're starting to feel it too.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's a really strong point, that they don't shy away from it. And I think they might have alluded to it a little bit, but this really felt like kind of the Star Trek 6 of Red Dwarf, in a sense. So like, we're just gonna let you all know we're old. Yeah. And a couple of them just might not make it to the end of the recording. And I felt, God, that's really nice honesty. But kind of like what we said about that dialogue between Lister and Rimmer, you can't get there unless you have this long journey. Just like you and I have talked about Star Trek 6 before. The Spock's line, would that be considered a joke? You can't do that stuff unless you have that relationship there for so long. And that to me is the real payoff of these programs going on and on and on and on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's so noteworthy because Red Dwarf usually doesn't go there. And they went there and they did it well, which is really admirable and fun. So,
and you got to think too, that's a after effect of Rob growing older too.
Mm-hmm.
Having kids, and his son is directing. No, his son is producing, and I think Rob's directing. And it's that as of children, you become more sentimental, don't you? You see things so much differently. You see it through their eyes and your eyes, and suddenly that really changes kind of that scope. And I have to imagine that's plays a big part in anybody writing for something for as long as they're writing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think for me, something that stands out with Red Dwarf as well is that it has gotten better, especially in the last few series. To me, there's kind of a lull in the middle around series 7 and 8, where it just quite up to the same standard that they had been doing. But so many series, they outstay their welcome, and you see the steady decline, and it's kind of painful to watch the last few series. But with Red Dwarf, they're just consistently, like series 10 and 11, to me, were just some of the best episodes that I'd seen in such a long time.
Yeah.
And so it's really gratifying to see all these people that you're really familiar and comfortable with, but to see them come back and do it so well is just really satisfying.
I would agree. And, there was a quote earlier, and I put it up. I'll put it up again. Tobias says, "I still don't think I've ever finished watching series 7." And I remember at the time that the first episodes were fun, but it really felt like it did kind of lose its way a little bit. And I remember Craig Charles in an interview saying something along the lines, and I am not saying that this is a verbatim of what he had said, but he was really excited about the fact they shot it single camera, kind of like a film, that you could really get some amazing performances. And I thought to myself, we should never forget that this is a comedy, whether or not you're screening it after the fact and people are laughing, or you're doing part of it in front of a live studio audience. That this is something, it's like you need to return to your roots. And I found Rimmer being my favorite character out of Red Dwarf. I really felt like once he exited, it just really lost a lot of its luster. But to be fair, I did a rewatch of the entire series, about 2.5 years ago. And I didn't find series 7 as difficult to get through as I had seen it before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just kind of how it is. But those
I had very much a similar experience when I went back and rewatched 7. And then I was like, and I had remembered 8 being pretty good at the time back in '99 when I first saw it.
Me too, yeah.
We watched series 8 and I'm like, Yeah, it's not as good as I remember it. So it is interesting how our memories play into this or factor into it as well.
I think I had the same thoughts to it too. Like there's some stuff that I found very interesting, but on the whole, I thought Series 8 was really lacking. And maybe it was because it was so much closer to the original intention of Red Dwarf that I appreciated it more at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Rewatching it, it just kind of was like, this isn't really what Red Dwarf is about. It's not about these guys with a full complement of crew on Red Dwarf. So and they're not even the real versions of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was tough. And the thing about Red Dwarf is sometimes it can get very gratuitous in terms of like trying to get a point across. And like with Kat getting those I don't know what the name of them, the shuttles that were dancing with him and stuff. I thought,
ooh.
and like the cliffhanger to the second part of Back in Red, I think that they like all were kind of like Dwayne Dibleys, like walking, and there's like some. Yeah. It's just like, and to be fair, Red Dwarf has never really shied away of parody. Obviously, Back to Earth is a parody of Blade Runner. I think the poster for Series 8 might have been the Phantom Menace, kind of a take on Phantom Menace.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. And this is an interesting comment. Brad says Red Dwarf has never really been good since Rob Grant stopped writing it, and I would say I would have to overall agree with it. I mean, I don't see how I couldn't overall agree with it. I think I'm surprised, and this isn't to rip on what Rob Grant can do. Am I getting it wrong? Am I getting the names wrong here? Red Dwarf is never good since Rob Grant started doing it. And I've been saying for the last hour that Rob Grant is the one who wrote it. It's Doug Naylor that's been doing it. I get them confused every time. And clearly, Mike, you don't know Red Dwarf either, because you could have a long time ago had to completely correct.
I could have.
So those episodes that Tom Baker wrote, no.
Yeah.
So sorry, folks. That's probably why the numbers of this thing is dropping. They're like, you can't even get the name of the writer correct. But once Rob left, I mean, I'm surprised how well Doug had done since with it. Not to say he's no good at it. It's more of just the fact that it's a lot to take on. But he seemed to have done a pretty good job of doing it. But the storytelling is very different, isn't it? It's I feels like when it was Rob and Doug together, there was like a lot of like really complex plots, such as even like Backwards, or some of the stuff in Series 1 that dealt in Series 2 that dealt with time travel and just really trying to keep track of everything. And they did a good job of putting it all together and then referencing it in other episodes. I don't feel it's quite that way from Series 7 onwards.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It plays more like people in space, and it's a sitcom. And that's not a bad thing. I'm just saying, though, that's what it feels like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see a comment from Brad Shepard, which I totally agree with. I don't know, Greg, if you can flash that one up there.
You're talking about the one that I did flash up there? Oh, yeah.
Yep, that one right there.
I didn't see that one.
I totally agree with Brad on that. But that together, there's just that extra bit of chemistry in the writing and in the jokes. And
mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then I also would say that Series 12 also I'd put into that. 10, 11, and 12. I remember getting my review copy for Series 10 from the BBC, and I was just like, well, I'll give it a shot. I still remember Back to Earth. And I watched it, and I'm like, from the first episode onwards, like,
mm-hmm.
That's not bad. That's not bad at all. These are some pretty good things going on here. So, yeah. Yes, absolutely. M-Corp is pretty cool. I also really like, and I can't remember the name of the last episode of Series 12 with Rimmer jumping through the different versions, which is kind of lazy storytelling in itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think, because that's so easy to be like, well, what if this person's in this situation? What if he's in this situation? But I enjoyed it, and that was the first time that we saw That's the first time that we saw the return of Holly in so long. So what do you think of? And thank you so much. I appreciate that, Tobias. That is the name of the episode. I remember this stuff when I'm not doing live shows, and then when I do them, I don't remember my own name. So it's kind of funny how that works, and you all get to laugh along with me. So Holly, Mike, what do you think?
I enjoyed Holly's return. This time in particular, it was like in series 12, it was more just like a little bit of a.
It's a cameo.
Yeah, it's a cameo. It's a one-off. Hey, but here I really liked how it wove into the plot. I enjoyed the sight gag at the beginning with his backup disc.
Yep.
Hilarious.
That was pretty
I
funny.
turned and explained it to my daughter what was so funny about that. That's beyond her world.
Did you remind her? Did you remind her that you're older than those discs? Also, it might just be worth pointing out.
That.
Good.
But then when he downloads his latest backup and the character is there, the writing is there. Holly, how do we get out of this? Well, have you tried the door?
Yeah.
Or he fires the missile. Oops, I missed.
My favorite is isn't it dangerous? Oh no, I'm miles away.
Yeah, I'm miles away.
So, are you a Norman Lovett Holly or a Hattie Holly?
I would have to put Lovett up there above Hattie. Although I really enjoy Hattie's portrayal of it too. But there's just something about his delivery, his style, his deadpan way that he does his lines. I just love it.
It's also written very differently too. Actually, it might on the outset look like that they're written the same way, but they're not. And I will be honest, and not to try to be the contrarian that I often look like. I do prefer Hattie over Holly, but over Holly. See, I'm still getting them wrong. Over Norman.
So what do you like in particular about Hattie's performance or take on the character?
I feel like that she approaches it more like an actor opposed to somebody reading cue cards. If you look at Norman, if Norman or any of his friends are watching, which I'd be shocked if they were, he's especially now, it just looks like he's really just reading the cards. He's still good. I'm not saying he's not good, but I mean, I just really thought that everything that Hattie did was much, it seemed much more believable to me. I thought she was good. It was also nice to have like a female presence in the cast without it necessarily being somebody who is real, and that's someone, because obviously if it's a real female on that ship, that whole dynamic would have been very different, as we saw in series 7.
Yeah.
So I just always preferred it that way. Granted, too, like I said, I really got involved with the show starting with series 5 and moved back from that. So, I mean, Hattie is my first Holly. And I was very disappointed when we got to series 6 that Holly was completely written out of the show.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would not have wanted to see that change. But so it's interesting that they went that route in series 6. Although wasn't 6 kind of the rushed one where they pushed it through and maybe we're a little underprepared for that series?
Probably. I mean, I know from like series 6 and 7, there was such a break, right? Because of stuff going on with Craig Charles and probably with Rob Grant taking off, that they had to rethink everything that they're doing. Like, why are they doing it? So yeah, I don't know. I find it's a very different tone, very different beast when it comes back, and only now, in my opinion, from series 10, it started getting to the point where I think it's consistently good, and I think they just got done away with a lot of the backstory. Like I would like to know whatever happened with Ace Rimmer, like with Rimmer taking on the persona of Ace Rimmer. Like is what we're seeing from Back to Earth onward, is that that clearly is the same Rimmer that that Holly created back in the end. But whatever happened to Ace Rimmer then? What did he just like become too much of a coward and came back? Because that would seem right. I mean, I would totally find that acceptable.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in that sense, where sometimes you just have to shrug as a fan and say, well, okay, there are going to be multiple storylines that maybe don't always line up here in terms of like from one series to the next.
Well, did you get the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy line in The Promised Land?
Which line was that?
When they were traveling for 3 months, and listeners tried to say, the thing about space is that it's big, really big.
And then Rimmer does this killer impression of Lister. It was beautiful, and it gets to like one of my like irritated spots, and it's so dumb because it's just one episode. But Body Swap, which I think was like a series 3 episode, where Lister and Rimmer swap bodies. And they take the voices and they flip the voices too, which always annoys me. It's like you wouldn't be speaking with someone else's voice box.
No.
And you can see I'm blanking on the actor's name for
Chris Berry.
Yeah, Chris Berry does a fantastic job of impersonations there.
Well, and if you know or may not know, Chris Berry is like one of the best mimics around, in that he started off like on Spitting Image, which was, these puppets that are doing like, it's parodies of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher and, all that stuff. And he was, what's that?
Who are those people?
Right. Exactly. And it really shows. And, if you've ever listened to any of the audiobooks of Red Dwarf that Chris is reading, he does that throughout the whole book, he can do cat, and he can do all, it's just amazing what his skill set is. And, I always thought that his British impersonation, his British voice is actually Kenneth Williams. Kenneth Williams, who is, a great recounter of stories and was in the Carry On films and Hancock's Half Hour, and just a really funny and intelligent person. And it's just a dead on. He plays British as that character, as that person. And I find it to be, amazing. And I'm surprised, and maybe I just don't know what's going on. I'm surprised that I don't see much of Chris in other programs now. I just don't. I don't know if he just decides not to, or if he just, because he does the public speaking for sure. Backtracking here just a little bit. Stephen has said Kaleidoscope has announced tonight they have recovered a full episode of Sunday Night Palladium from November 6, 1966. Well, Stephen, you clearly got to the show a little bit too late tonight, because we actually played a clip of that tonight, and it was a lot of fun. So when it's done, when we're done with this, please go back and take a look, because we're excited to be able to show a clip of it. I think it's at the hour 3 mark of the show that the clip actually appears. Okay, so we haven't been on that long, but I did take a little bit of time up front. I got a question for you, Mike.
Yes.
Did you pick this up?
Oh, did I pick this up? Look how prepared I am for today. We should do a tweet along to each other.
We should. Wouldn't that be horrific? Yes.
Oh, man. And with The Promised Land, I'm itching to go back and rewatch the series again. And I may just do that. I'm trying to get my daughters to watch it with me. And they both are up for it. It's just like time. But man, I may just have to pop the Blu-rays in and just watch it without them. I'm sorry, girls. They're upstairs. They don't know I just said that.
just like you did with the Doctor Who episodes of the last series. Oops. Oh my goodness.
They think Series 12 hasn't aired yet, so
yeah, I haven't looked at the quality yet, and part of it too is because I did just rewatch it relatively recently. That I'm not ready for going through it all again, and I hate to say it, I am having a little bit of problem watching SD stuff up-resed to Blu-ray, which is odd because I don't have a problem watching the DVDs up-resing to HD. So I don't know what it is, and I think maybe it's just something in my mind that is not quite registering it yet. But as you can see, though, being the collector that I am, of course I had to get it. The question I have for you, Mike, did you get it right when it came out, or did you get it more relatively recently? Because you may or may not know there's problems with the discs, a couple of the discs.
Yes. I got it, like, I don't know, like I didn't get it immediately when it came out, but I can't recall exactly how long I waited. It was one of those things where I waited until like a birthday and said, okay, I'll pop for it on a birthday, since it was a little bit pricier item. So I honestly don't know. Is there a way to tell if I've got the right one or the wrong one? Is there like a code on there somewhere?
There is. I think there's something on the discs itself, which I would have to go look up and see because I don't remember off the top of my head. Only reason why I got it, because I wasn't even planning on getting it, but the only reason I got it was inexpensive, and then we were told that Amazon got in the corrected discs, so it should be fine.
It's like Schrodinger's cat. If we don't actually watch the Blu-rays, then we don't know for sure, and we're fine.
Well, how many times do I have to buy this stuff? And yet I do constantly. I'm always buying this stuff. I'm just trying to think. And folks, if there's anything that you want to say about the episode, please let us know. Mike, is there anything that that you think that we haven't touched on that you would like to talk about?
Gosh. Not that I can think. I mean, we could talk for another couple hours on our favorite jokes,
right?
Interspersed throughout there. But no, I'm eager. I'm hopeful for a new series. Like I appreciate the one-off hour-and-a-half special, but it's not a full series, and I would love a full series.
I have a feeling that based on stuff I've been reading, that I think these specials are probably going to be the way that they go. For now on. I hope that's for a series also, but you think about it, overall it's cheaper to do the special than to do a series.
Yep.
If this is a good starting point for specials, I'd be okay with it. Also, if it meant that we get them more regular than every 3 years, then I'd be fine with that too. I get tired of waiting, and I think we all do, and then finally get to it. At least I think there was a good payoff this time for the episode, which was really nice, and I'm happy about it. Overall, though, what is your favorite series of Red Dwarf?
Gosh, I'm really, as I've listened to you talk about like your first series, I almost wonder if this is really what's influencing me. I really love the first two series. Dwarf. I love kind of the bleakness and the loneliness, like even the opening credits. I love how like deadpan serious the opening credits are, and ominous, and it's not this go lucky happy music that we get throughout the rest of the series. But I really enjoy those, even though I love Crichton as a character, and he's not really in there except for just one episode. But both the first two series I really enjoy, and series 4, which for me is when things really kicked in on a consistent level. And then of course the last 3, 10, 11, and 12 are just gorgeous. I love them.
And they are gorgeous. You could tell, especially 10 looks pretty good, but 11 and 12, they moved to a new production company, and they did 11 and 12 at the same time. It looks amazing. It's a very it's beautiful looking. It's a very beautiful looking production. Also, it's very lavish. Looks like money is spent on it. Looks like some of those same sets for Red Dwarf are being reused. So it looks like that finally, like there's some money to it. But I'll have to admit, I've never was one, because I look back at previous interviews from the cast, and I get the feeling that they think that it was done on the cheap, which I know it was, especially series 1. The sets were very cheap. But I always thought that, quite frankly, coming from the BBC, it didn't look all that bad. I thought that there was a lot of innovation and a lot of really good quality effects done in those series, that if Doctor Who was still going during that period of time, I don't think they'd be too far from that.
I think it depends on what you consider your level of cheap. Right? Depending on what series you're used to and what you enjoy watching, it might look fantastic, or it might look like really tawdry stuff if you're used to slick looking sci-fi.
And I think it's also really fun too to see that really they kept to like the same opening and closing credits, at least music wise. I mean, that closing credit music has been used since the very first episode. I mean, even though Red Dwarf has changed a lot over the years, it still stays the same. There's very much a consistency that that is done with that. So I really do appreciate that.
And what's amazing is how it can still feel fresh, even though it's that consistent.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know what? They all still look pretty good for being the age that they are, and the fact that this is a very. It is funny. I do think I was gonna say it's very. There's a lot of you have to be kind of in shape to do it because a lot of movements and stuff. But it does feel like that there wasn't a whole lot that they were doing. Like there wasn't a whole lot of running around. They kind of sat in Starbug for a great period of time, you know. And it's smart because it's nice to see that you know we can write around these characters in a way that still services them, but not try to make them into something that they aren't. Like for example. As much as I like Indiana Jones, I really will not find it believable to see an 80-year-old Harrison Ford, you know, dangling from a helicopter or something. It's just not possible anymore.
Racing through the new Indiana Jones movie, in other words.
Well, you know, with this virus and stuff, I mean, they pushed back production. I don't think it's ever going to happen.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised actually if it happened or not.
Yeah.
Just a couple of comments I wanted to get to, as you are a collector also, you know, and I joke about the fact that I, you know, collect stuff and whatever. First of all, Barry wants to tell us that Lotus Eaters is great, highly recommended. I've heard that. I'm really excited about that. Chuck says never heard of the channel Dave. It's you know, I would look at it as something like a TBS in the US or something like that airs both previously made programs as well as new content. And Red Dwarf has been the home for Dave for a number of years now, and it's doing really well for them, which I'm really happy to see.
That's a good reminder too. I was on a panel on Red Dwarf at a local Doctor Who convention that we have here in the cities called Console Room. And it didn't hit me until we were talking about it, but like for a lot of US fans, they're not aware of anything post Series 8 because of just the accessibility. You know, you saw it on PBS, or you'd see it in like some of the you know, Best Buy up on the shelf. But since Back to Earth, you know, not every fan of Red Dwarf, US fan, is really aware that they've continued to make series because it's not as easily available. You know, you're not seeing it on television, you're not seeing it on shelves. So it's a good reminder that, yeah, you know, people don't know about Dave, don't know that new content has been made in the last decade.
Well, and I'm curious to know, do we know for sure that PBS isn't offering it? Because they do offer stuff like, you know, they're still offering new Doctor Who. And one of my side projects, which I'm slowly getting to, is I'm working with people I know at BBC Home Entertainment that's trying to get me in touch with people at BBC for syndication, because I want to do a project about what has aired, what was available to air in the US back in the 70s and the 80s and part of their syndication package. Because just because we didn't see it here didn't mean that it didn't get offered, such as, say, Survivors or something like that. So that's something that I've been really wanting to do. And I used to have a contact who would tell me what's currently being available, but I don't have that anymore. And I would love to know about Red Dwarf, like if they broke up Back to Earth, or they break up the Promised Land and they sell it to PBS station, because this is stuff like Promised Land would be a great pledge drive filler. You know, you can have this sucker go for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and break it up with pledge breaks, and it would be very interesting to see if they do something like that. So I just don't know if that stuff is still being offered or not.
Yeah, that's a good point. And would you get the Red Dwarf tote bag or the mug if you pledged?
You get the mug that when you put in the hot liquid, the Red Dwarf like will appear out of nowhere. It's really, really very interesting. And then it's hard to say with the DVDs and Blu-rays, because you're right. Back in the day, you can go to a Best Buy and they'd still carry some of those. I think even as recent as like maybe even Series 11 or 12. But now most of these places, they've reduced their footprint of physical media. So you can only, I mean, maybe they might pick it up there, but there's so many other titles that is vying for it, and I don't think Red Dwarf will be one that's on the shelves, unfortunately. So how do people know that new Red Dwarf is being made?
You know, unless you're you know, really into it and researching it for yourself. If you're a casual viewer, you may not know.
Right. I mean, of course, the casual viewers, to be honest, are the ones that always make me pull my hair out because they just have a life, and they get facts wrong, and then I'm just like, come on, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, Robert, my friend Robert, and I, and your friend Robert, when I visited him in Ohio, we went to a get together. It was like this event put on by the local PBS station there, and they had John Inman there. And as soon as like he comes on stage, the first person who lifts up their hand or question, and he's like, yes, and she's just like, Mr. Humphreys, are you free? With her Kentucky accent, and the room. See, yes, you and I are like, oh, dear, sweet. The room erupts with applause. Everyone's just going crazy of it. And then, of course, Humphrey, you know, his name's actually John Inman, not Mr. Humphreys. John Inman, of course, he knows how to play well. He's like, I'm free. And then the room just erupts even more. And it's just, Robert and I just look at each other like, yes. Very much.
Say you want to have a jelly baby. Say it.
Right, exactly. You know, it's even like at Time Festival in 1988 when John Pertwee is announced. He comes out of the TARDIS, because you were there for that, right?
I was there for that.
They let you out of the asylum that weekend, and he's just like, I am the Doctor, and everyone just explodes, and I'm just like, you're not the Doctor. You know, I'm sorry. I guess I have no fun in me, but you're not the Doctor. You're an actor, John Pertwee, and I'm sorry. You're stop it. Stop it. So yeah, that's.
You were a bundle of fun back in 1988. Let me tell you.
Here's the fun fact. I still am. I'm still as interesting now as I was back then. So yeah, I take it very seriously, Mike. I have to admit, like. And I think we may have had this conversation before. I get annoyed if we watch, like, if there's a bunch of us watching Doctor Who and somebody laughs at it.
Yes,
I get angry at that, and I get really frustrated, and I just will not tolerate it. You know, because like the effects might be jokey, and I just like, what are you laughing at? Just watch it and shut up. You know, I mean, that's why no one wants to watch stuff with me. Well, someone coughs, I'm just like, don't do that.
And not to rip on any other series, but I've been watching Space 1999. I know, right? And one of the big ahas for me, like it's a fun nostalgic thing because I remember it as a kid. And it looks visually very good still, even it's a product of its time, but the model effects are really solid. They've got really cool looking sets, but my gosh, the writing is just not that good. And it was such an eye opener for me that I think the reason why I and you gravitate towards shows like Doctor Who is that it's the writing and the acting, the performances that are much more engrossing and draw you in much more than the visuals. So I don't care if a wall wobbles. Who cares?
And it never had.
Yeah.
It wobbles more, in my opinion, when I'm watching a historical drama than on Doctor Who, to be honest. Also, you know, I think you and I were shocked to find out that it was children's television.
What? No, a family drama. That's like telling me that my Star Wars action figures aren't action figures, they're dolls. No, they're action figures.
I don't collect action figures. Don't look behind me. I'm 46 years old. I don't collect that stuff. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I didn't angle my camera over towards mine, so.
You have a whole sad room to yourself. I mean,
I do. Yes, I like to say that this is my geek cave, but I think there's a reason why the rest of my family doesn't come in here.
Well, geeks are afraid of caves, so it can't be a geek cave. But also, didn't I hear that your daughters had to share a room because you had to have this room for yourself?
No, that's a vicious lie. There is no egress window in here, so I couldn't possibly make this into a bedroom. It has to be an office. Now, we talked to my wife about how this turned from an office into a geek cave or geek hole or whatever we want to call it.
I like geek hole.
Geek hole.
Kind of make me think of the owner of it. I mean, I think you've just created a new name for fans of this genre that you don't like, and call them a geek hole.
Geek hole. You're such a geek hole.
Such a geek hole. God.
Cram it up your geek hole.
Can't stand you, you geek hole. Yeah, I like it. I'd use it, but I won't. So one of the things I do see in the background there is that you have a Doctor Who Tom Baker scarf, but it's much more, dare I say, pathetic than that.
Yeah.
It's much more. What's going on back there? Tell us about your hobby.
Way back in the 80s, when I was watching Doctor Who on PBS, I got really entranced in Tom Baker's scarf. I just thought it looked so cool, and before there was cosplay, you put on a long coat, you put on something resembling a scarf, and voila, you're the Doctor.
You sure were. Yep.
Yeah.
You really were. I mean, you wear some celery, and you didn't care about anything else. It was like they got it. Right?
This is why COVID was not a thing back then, because that was our social distancing right there.
It really was. Yeah.
No one came near me. But it was out of that I conned my mom into crocheting a scarf, and then I wanted it knitted because they're really knitted, not crocheted. And she said, no, but you can learn how to knit, Mike. And so I went and learned how to knit and watched the show ad nauseum and tried to figure out the pattern. And then stepped away from knitting scarves for 30 years, and then came back when I realized that the internet is full of other people like me who have got the pattern figured out. They've got all of the variations, things that I didn't understand about the scarf back in the day, why it looked this way or that way, or why it suddenly seemed to change. It's all been thoroughly researched. So I kind of got back into it just for the fun of it.
Yep.
I don't do any kind of cosplay, but I do like to just have it out and about. So I started knitting, and it turns out there's 9 variations of Tom Baker's scarf, which is nerdy. All right. And I think you should do a whole episode just on that sometime. Your figures
totally can
skyrocket. There'd be hundreds of people.
Yeah, led by you.
Yes, and my mom, who would log in, and every other family.
Is she aware of? Is she entranced with the different variations, or just the fact that?
No, she just has to support her son.
Oh, wow.
My family is very tolerant of it. My daughters admire my approach to precision. Let's put it that way. And it is a rabbit hole. I've gone down this rabbit hole wholeheartedly. And it's a fun, relaxing thing to do nowadays. It's just, if I'm watching TV, I like to knit with my hands. And so, and occasionally I'll sell off a scarf to somebody who's really interested, or gift one, which then means I need to make a new one for myself, because I got to have every variation of it, because that's the nerd I am.
Right. No, and that's good. Speaking of which, and it's not a business for you by any stretch of the imagination, but if someone is interested in doing that, getting a scarf made, they should get in touch with you, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd be happy to talk to anyone who's interested. I do really detailed replicas, highly detailed, down to just the minutia of weird things that have happened to it. But if someone just wants a casual scarf too, we can talk through that and figure out what that might look like. But I work really hard to try to figure out the right color scheme, and it's not just me. There's tons of people out on the internet who have all the yarns figured out, what the patches are supposed to look like on the shot of scarf and where they go. And so, but that's kind of my thing. I just enjoy the precision of it and trying to get it as close to the real deal as possible.
Which, is really cool. That's why I say, if you want a consultation, right? Because you do, it's not just a matter of we'll send you a scarf. It's what do you want on all the variations? And I have to point out, I seem to have one too from you made. And this is I believe a season 17 scarf.
Correct. Yep.
And one of the reasons is that what you had done was made sure that where the joins were for the scarf, because of the abuse it went through during previous series.
Oh, and it was majorly abused throughout the 7 seasons or 6 seasons. Yeah. So I have friends who are just like real knitters, and I'll show them this and they just cringe, because it's just like no actual knitter would want to do that to a scarf, but that's what the production team did to the scarf over the years. So yeah, you replicate all these really weird things.
I've never worn a scarf before. I've never worn a Doctor Who scarf before. Now that
it looks good on you. It definitely looks good on Linus, your cat.
Well, he's not wearing it. He's on it. He sits on it. But the thing about it too is you say it's like real knitters. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many years you have to knit to be able to call yourself a real knitter, Mike, to be very honest.
Well, a nerdy thing here about this. I started up again in 2015, the summer of 2015. Mm-hmm. I did my first scarf. I was happy with it for about a week, and then I started looking at it going, oh, and I started seeing all the mistakes I made, as often happens when you're doing something. Mm-hmm. And so I really wasn't happy with the final product until about scarf number 5. And that's when I was like, okay, now I'm doing this well enough that I feel like I like the way this looks. I'm not seeing the mistakes. Like, anytime you cook your own food, and you serve it to other people, you notice the things that didn't go the way you wanted them to.
I agree. I mean, it took me about 3 years to realize I shouldn't be seasoning with rat poisoning.
Yeah. Arsenic is not a spice.
It's just like, why isn't this like written somewhere so I could, figure that out? Mm-hmm. So yeah, folks, if you are interested in that, I would highly recommend just having a conversation with Mike over at just shoot him a note at spacetimenerd@gmail.com. Mm-hmm. Or if you just want to talk scarves with him, because he is very much a nerd like that, and he loves.
Yeah, if you just want to send me a picture of your scarf, I love seeing. Like, I've still got my original one from 1985. It looks horrible. Like, it's not well constructed. It's ratty. It's 30 some years old, but I love it because it's mine, and I made it with my own hands, and I figured out a pattern. It wasn't accurate. The colors weren't that good, but I'll never get rid of it.
Well, that's fantastic. Mike, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me.
I hope you had fun.
I had a great time.
Good. All right. We'll talk to you later. And so really that's about it. I just want to go through a couple things before we head off. I want to talk about if you have any questions or feedback, please send me feedback at from the archive, feedback at fromthearchive.co.uk. You can Twitter me over at fromthearchive. Facebook is facebook.com/fromthearchivemn. Blog is there, and also we put up videos on YouTube. So please check us out at youtube.com/fromthearchive1. Really would appreciate it if you have constructive feedback for this. That would be fantastic. I want to talk a little bit about the next episode, which will be on May 3rd. We're going to have a conversation. We're going to have Richard Marson on. And he's going to talk about Blue Peter, BBC Television Center. I spelled center wrong. This is really good. And we're going to have a lot of clips he's going to provide to us that he is going to have for Blue Peter, BBC Television Center. Plus, I see so many people talk about how much they like him being on our podcast and liked what he had to say. This is your chance to ask him questions. And don't forget, he wrote a couple of amazing books for Milk. One, of course, being the John Nathan Turner book also. So that will be next time, which is May 3rd. And then our show for May 17th, I'm not going to announce it yet, but if you like 1960s Doctor Who, I think you might like this one. And don't think for a minute it has like announcement of missing episodes or anything. It's nothing like that. But I think it's going to be a really fun show if we can pull it off. So definitely want to let you all know that, and please share this with other people. Let them know that this is happening, because I'd love to be able to make sure there's enough people who are interested in this having a chance to ask Mike a question or Richard a question or whatever. So please consider that. Also, just want to kind of note one thing we didn't really talk about. which I might talk about next time, is since the last time that we met, there's been the death of Honor Blackman, the death of Tim Brooke Taylor, the death of Pip Baker, and wanted to kind of remember them. And just timing-wise, as far as getting stuff ready, I didn't have the time to do so. So hopefully we can do that in a future episode. But I do want to note that on this day in 1992, Frankie Howard passed away. And then on this day in 2011, Elizabeth Sladen passed away, which in itself is, to me, still one of those that I can't believe she's gone. And I don't really get that way about people who are on TV shows. For those of you who may not know, she has played Sarah Jane Smith in Doctor Who and had this amazing comeback in the series, and actually had her own series spin off from that, Sarah Jane Adventures, which could have gone on for who knows how long if she hadn't sadly passed away. So, just good to remember those wonderful people and those significant milestones. Other than that, really hope that you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think. Let me know how, or please consider sharing this. And really, this has been great. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back on May 3rd with Richard Marson. Thank you, everyone. Have a great couple weeks.